welcome everybody, and welcome to How VMware Powers Immersive Collaboration with Miro and Slack. My name is Daniel Slovis. I'm a customer success manager here at Miro, and I'm thrilled to be joined by my co-host, Yusuf Sajid from Slack, who's on the solutions marketing team, and our guest speaker, Bryan Hope, who is the Director of Unified Communications and Collaboration at VMware.
Awesome. Thanks for the intro, Daniel. I'm super excited to be co-hosting with you all today from Slack. For context, VMware is a 42,000 person company, and Bryan and his team led them through a successful transition to hybrid work, and he's here to share his experiences with you all today. So some great learnings for everyone to take away. So whether or not you use Miro and/or Slack, we hope you leave today's session with some ideas for how your teams can work better together in a more connected and highly collaborative way, and also in an automated way as well. We're going to kick off today's session with an overview of Bryan's approach, and then dive into some examples of immersive collaboration at VMware. We're then going to wrap things up with some learnings and best practices that Bryan learned along the way that you can take back to your teams today and begin implementing. So make sure you stick around to the end, as Bryan's going to take some questions and answers from the audience. And we also have some resources to share, including a special offer from Slack, which is always exciting, that will help you take action from today's session. So with that, I'll toss it back to Daniel. Let's jump right in.
Awesome. Thanks, Yusuf. Bryan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Do you think we can kick things off with an overview of your background and current role at VMware?
Yeah, happy to share just a little bit about me and VMware. So I'm actually originally from Vancouver, Canada, now based in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I've been at VMware for just over 12 years and about 20 years in the tech industry overall. At VMware, I lead the Unified Communication and Collaboration team to deliver on our mission of enabling colleagues to do their best work with frictionless and delightful products, experiences, and work practices. What this really meant for the last few years was shifting VMware from being 80% office-based to being 95% remote or hybrid. And just for fun, outside of work, you'll usually find me traveling, road tripping, or at a Cars and Coffee event somewhere.
Awesome. Yeah, Bryan, you've got some really great LinkedIn content on both technology, strategy, and EV, emerging technologies. But just to kind of bring us back to today, do you think you can share with us some of the IT trends you're seeing in the industry and how that's influenced your hybrid strategy at VMware?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say the overarching theme that we're seeing right now is really pressure to control or reduce our spend, while also supporting hybrid work as the preferred way of working for our colleagues. So it's kind of these two sometimes competing priorities. What this really means for us as we look at our portfolio is that we're driving towards having fewer applications in our ecosystem, making sure that we can reduce context switching between different applications, and ultimately drive deeper dexterity in the apps that are remaining in the ecosystem, so making deeper use of the ones that are left. So this has influenced our overall strategy at VMware around collaboration. And so first, one of the big things we did is we created our concept of the one VMware platform. We wanted to enable all of our colleagues to operate as one single company with a complete interconnected employee experience through what we call the one VMware platform. And really some big pillars of that led us to prioritize Slack and Miro and other apps in what we call a hub and spoke model as part of our strategy.
Awesome. Thanks, Bryan. I know you just referenced that hub and spoke model for tooling. Can you expand a little bit on what this means in practice and how it's impacted teams at VMware in terms of their ability to collaborate?
Yeah, so about a year ago, just over a year ago, we announced what we called our Slack first strategy. And we put out a vision to our colleagues, we published it, that if it can be done on Slack, we do it on Slack. Everything else integrates with Slack. And then that really is where we get this hub and spoke approach from, where Slack is the core, Slack is the hub, and then products like Miro act as an extension of Slack, and everything is integrated and seamless. And this has really impacted how teams of VMware collaborate, right? We've got everyone collaborating in the same way across the company. So we're having more equitable experiences. Colleagues are finding it easier to use with less context switching, and our colleague satisfaction that we actually measure through focus groups and surveys has risen over the last few years and continues to rise. And we're seeing this in the numbers, in the way that we track adoption, consumption, and colleague use. So for example, 87% of our colleagues are weekly active users of Slack. We have over 10,000 colleagues that are monthly active users of Miro. And what we find most interesting and very rewarding is when we look at as these applications like Slack and Miro have risen in adoption, we've also seen a 13% reduction in emails since last year and a 20% reduction in Zoom meetings since last year. So colleagues are saving time and becoming more productive.
Amazing. Really, really interesting stats, Bryan. And I love the overall approach of making it really seamless and easy for your colleagues, but manageable and scalable for your team. Would love to double click into what immersive collaboration looks like in action. Do you mind taking a few minutes just speaking to some of the examples of how Miro and Slack are used by teams at VMware?
Yeah, so I think we've got a few examples up on the screen here, right? So the first one is where we're using it for project and initiative management, right? So Miro and Slack are used on cross-functional projects and initiatives across VMware. And we often now start new initiatives by agreeing as a team that, for example, we are not going to send any emails on this project, right? And we verbally agree to that upfront at the beginning. And so then we use tools like Miro to really ideate and think about the strategy and work on that. And then a tool like Slack is used to share updates and to ensure alignment across these cross-functional participants and stakeholders. The screenshot that we have up here on the screen here is actually an example of a Miro board that was used to plan our tech roadshow that we had on site in Palo Alto, where we had a series of colleagues dispersed around the world, planning this event completely remotely, never meeting in person before the event, and then successfully hosting the event on site in Palo Alto with over 700 attendees. And that was one of those projects where we never had to travel and be face-to-face. We never sent any emails, and it was entirely over tools like Slack and Miro. Another example, the second one I'll dive into here, is agile rituals, right? So Miro and Slack are really powerful for supporting our teams that work in agile ways. Miro, for example, is used to do icebreakers, to do retrospectives, and to do visual road mapping of our products. And then we use Slack for the conversations that support that agile work. So things like asynchronous decision-making, ad hoc huddles, project updates, and tracking deliverables. This particular example we have on the screen was a Miro icebreaker that we used during one of our last office hour team meetings. And it was kind of a non-traditional way to open up a meeting, but it was a way for us to discuss the emotions that each of us were feeling in the team, get that out in the open, and then transition into being ready for a productive team meeting. And in this particular case, we used the private mode in Miro so that people could feel that they could be honest without being individually identifiable with the emotion that they put out there, unless they wanted to speak up and share it. And then our third example that we have up there around customer collaboration. So Miro and Slack are also used externally to collaborate and work with our customers and support our customers. We use Miro a lot, for example, for doing workshops with customers. And then Slack Connect is used to keep that open line of communication with customers, to follow up on things, and really, again, reduce email and increase the use of Slack for just getting to decisions faster. What we have on screen here is an example of a template used by our Tanzu Labs team. And they offer consulting services to companies that use VMware products. And they love doing retrospectives with customers. And customers, again, really appreciate private mode, because customers, especially our customers in Europe, they want to make sure that their feedback is not identifiable with a particular individual. So private mode on Miro has really enabled that. And then lastly, I would say the thing that they use it a lot for is 2x2 prioritization exercises, right? So really visually looking at all the things that we could be doing and aligning on the things that are most important and are going to have the most impact.
That's awesome to hear, Brian. Thanks for walking through those examples. And I know we at Slack, I use that example of an event in the project management, whether it's pre-event planning, day of, and then doing retrospectives afterwards, and having Miro boards to get all those ideas out, sort them through, and have that all aligned in Slack is a great example. One of the things you've been mentioning is that hub and spoke model and bringing apps like Miro into Slack. And what our customers love about Slack is that it is this platform that you can bring apps you know and love into your flow of work, with over 2,600 apps available in the app directory to bring into your flow of work. So can you share some examples of the value you found of bringing apps into Slack, with Miro app being one of those examples?
Yeah, so Slack apps and integrations are really critical to that success of the one VMware platform, right? Because we want that fully integrated experience. And Miro is an example of that, because Miro has an out-of-the-box Slack integration that allows updates from Miro to go directly into Slack, giving people really easy access to their Miro boards and to know what's changed on a Miro board. And at VMware, we have over 6,000 colleagues who are actively using the integration between Miro and Slack. And again, back to my theme of reducing email, those notifications used to go by email. That was kind of the old way of doing notifications. And now they're just right in Slack, where people are already working every day. We've also found a lot of success with building custom apps to automate workflows and things that we're doing at VMware. And recently, I'll give an example. We took a really non-traditional approach when we decided to roll out Zoom Phone to our colleagues. And this approach really allowed us to offer them a seamless migration experience. So in the past, we would have ramped up a project, sent out emails to colleagues, done training, but instead this time, IT just sent direct messages to colleagues in Slack, invited them to make the migration to Zoom Phone. There was a button that they could click to say yes. When they clicked yes, everything was automated in the background, and then they got a confirmation message back with all their training and enablement materials in real time, just in time, there in Slack. And this was powerful to us because there's a lot of change happening at VMware, and this allowed colleagues to be in charge of when they experience this change. And we were really pleased that over 9,000 people clicked that yes button within the first 2 weeks and made the change with almost no additional support or enablement required. That was really significant for us and represented 50% of the people that had to make that migration, and they did it self-serve within the first 2 weeks. So we really like that Slack allows us to bring the work or the activities right to where people are already doing their work every day.
Awesome. Brian, thanks so much for sharing some examples of how Miro and Slack help teams at VMware work in a more connected way, and the power of apps and integrations. Just looking at time, want to start moving over to the next section, so there's plenty of time for Q&A. But just to wrap things up, do you think you can share with us some of the learnings and best practices that you picked up along the way through this transformation to hybrid?
Yeah, definitely. One of the first things that came up, when we made the transition to being a hybrid workforce back in 2020, there was a lot of talk, not just about tools, but how do you actually get work done together as a company and as colleagues. So I'd really recommend to people to think about establishing work practices at your company, right? It's not just about the tools you provide, but it's also about how work actually gets done. What are the prescriptive behaviors that you can advertise to your colleagues that help them understand the way that work gets done at your company? So it could be things like meeting hygiene. It could be things like explaining how asynchronous collaboration actually works. Those aren't tool questions, those are behavioral. So really don't forget to invest in work practices. The second one is, these kinds of changes and transformations take executive alignment and support. And it's not easy, it can be tough, it can take a long time to sometimes get alignment, but it's really necessary. And a key learning for us was that when you're making a change, especially if you're moving from, say, one platform to another, colleagues told us that they follow their leaders, right? And so they look to see if their leaders are authentically visible and active, doing the things that IT is telling people should be done. So those people look to their leaders, and if they see their leaders there, they will follow, and they will mimic their leaders' real authentic behaviors as well. And then lastly, I would say for maximum impact and benefit, and this is sometimes where it's a bit controversial when I tell people this, but I always say have conversations in public, right? We have a natural instinct to think that something should be a direct message, almost all the time. For example, we need to flip that instinct and think about everything is a public conversation unless it actually needs to be private. So think public first, unless it really needs to be private. And this is important because especially in platforms like Slack and Miro, it creates a lot of transparency and awareness in the organization, which if you're hybrid, if you're distributed around the world, that's critically important. So think about how you can get your teams to drive that mindset shift of talking in public.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Bryan. And +1 to the best practice number 3. It just makes such a cultural impact as well in your place of work, and ideas begin to flow, getting more collaborators to help work away on big projects as well. So love hearing that from you. So again, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed being here, and I'm looking forward, hopefully, to some amazing questions.
Yeah, for sure. Looks like we have a few more moments left. And so I think we have some audience questions still piping in. As we get those questions going, and again, feel free to use the questions module to get those in. Bryan, can you share a little bit more about or Daniel yourself too, how to get started in Miro and what that looks like on a project, and just any tips on also bringing Miro into Slack and getting that all set up?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and I'll start with maybe like a bigger picture. So I'm not sure if anyone here has heard of the concept of team level agreements, right? Like when a team forms, it's the process of choosing how you work together, defining what tools you're going to use and for what reasons. When a project team comes together, it's the same thing. You should start by picking what tools are we going to use and how do we agree to use those for each other. When it comes to like something like how will we use Miro on this project, it is going to vary by what the project is trying to accomplish. So you might use it for prioritizing tasks. You might use it for drawing a customer journey. If you're designing, a new digital experience and you want to draw the customer journey, you might use Miro for that. So I think what's most important is that you as a team simply upfront decide, here's the tools we're going to use and here's what each of them is going to be used for. And as long as you align on that as a team, there's a lot of flexibility in what you decide on.
Yeah, and I can expand on that just a little bit, because as a customer success manager, we use Miro for every project, but Miro is also a Slack first shop as well. We find that using Slack channels for everything, whether it's a project, whether it's a team, but starting with a Slack channel, bringing everybody together and establishing those lines of communication is a great first step and allows for the hub and spoke model to be seamless. So that's kind of my thoughts on how I've seen other customers get started and how we start projects here at Miro.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know at Slack, one of the ways we got started with introducing Miro and finding those use cases is just simply picking one project and dedicating all of that brainstorming or work to be done in Miro through that collaborative board. And then it could be something that is part of a larger project, but picking one of those steps and dedicating it, and then afterwards getting feedback from your stakeholders on how that process was and how you may want to make that more systematized. Is a great way to kind of move forward and get a tool adopted.
Yeah, I agree with all of it. All of what you just said, both of you.
Awesome. It looks like we might have a couple of new questions in the chat. What are some of your other favorite icebreakers, Bryan?
Yeah, so first, I'll plug the Miroverse, I believe it's called, right? Where you can go and look at things other people have published so you don't have to start from scratch. We found an icebreaker that each person on the team would get a box, and there was a series of things that they could kind of vote on in that box. Are you a cat person or a dog person? Are you a ocean, a mountains or desert person? And then there were some questions you could answer. And just little things like that already exist. You don't have to create it from scratch, but it was a great way to jump into a meeting and say, everybody take 5 minutes to fill out their little box. And then, we have a rather large team, so not everybody can answer all in one meeting. But what we ended up doing with that Miro board is every time we had an office hours, 2 or 3 more people would talk through how they answered. And so over this long course of time, we just got to know our colleagues and team members a lot more deeper than we would have otherwise. So that one was a particular one that comes to mind.
Amazing. Yeah, the Miroverse is a great place to find icebreakers. There's always new ones in there that I find, and they're just so creative because it's just, there's so much that you could do to humanize, right, work, and the icebreaker is a perfect way to do that. Looks like there might be another question. What are some of the best Miro tips, tricks, or features you see used at VMware? I think you might have mentioned private mode, but Bryan, are there other features, tips, and tricks that you've seen?
Yeah, private mode, I think I'll definitely repeat again, because I think it's rather new and it's really powerful, right? If you're doing something where your customers, your colleagues may be shy about putting a check mark on the board because they don't want you to know it was them, private mode is great. Another one that I really recommend is take advantage of the templates, right? Sometimes when you go into Miro and you want to start working on something, it's just a blank canvas, right? And you might not know where to start. So spend some time going through the templates, searching what's out there, search for keywords based on what you're trying to do. And I think you'll be inspired by the fact that you're probably not the first person trying to accomplish a particular activity. There's probably a template that will at least get you started or help you kickstart the thoughts in your mind about how to go forward. Also, shameless plug, work with your CSM to understand what your company does and can use Miro for, and then get sort of tailored enablement.
Awesome. Fantastic. And I guess since we have like 1 more minute left, same question. I'm curious, but with Slack features.
Oh, yes. Okay. Super fast on Slack. When you first go into Slack, it can get very noisy very fast. So we find it's very important to train people on how to customize your sidebar, how to customize your notification settings, and be prescriptive about which apps you think your colleagues should install by default, whether it's Outlook, Google, Miro, all those different apps they could install. Tell them, like, do these 5 on your first day. So I would say those are my super fast 3 tips for how to help your colleagues get into Slack successfully.
Awesome. And Yusuf, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think those are great tips from Bryan. Some of my favorite hacks or tips would be scheduling messages in advance. I know sometimes, like in the evening, that's when I get a little bit more focused time, and so I'll schedule messages to come the next morning. Also, if you right click on a message or a channel or anything, you can control how you want to see your notifications for that, whether it's like reminding you in an hour or in a day, or just to notify you whenever that person mentions you, or to just mute notifications from a channel so you just know to check it on your own time. And you kind of build these habits once you start to do it a couple of times in Slack.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, we're just about at time, so let's wrap things up with thank you from all of us. Bryan, appreciate you joining. Yusuf, thanks for co-hosting with me.
Of course.
Everyone on the session, thank you so much for being here with us. We have a handful of resources, not candy, resources for you, including a link to Bryan's blog on immersive collaboration and continue the conversation, links to the templates that are used at VMware, the link to install the Miro app for Slack, and then the special surprise from Slack is that we're offering 25% off upgrades to Slack Pro or Business Plus for 12 months if you are a Miro customer. Thanks, everybody, and hope you all enjoy the rest of Distributed.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.